Welcome to our 2023 Trends Making Headlines Wellness Masterclass. Please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. Please display your name and company to deepen the networking opportunity this call represents. Some quick logistics before we get started. Feel free to choose between speaker or gallery view, and please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. I will mute everyone shortly. It's my pleasure to introduce Nancy Davis, Chief Creative Officer and Executive Director of the Global Wellness Summit and Institute, who will present today's program featuring Beth McGroarty and Skylar Hubler. Nancy, good morning. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jessie. I'll wait while you mute everybody and then I will unmute.
Let me get back into my Zoom here.
Great, and you can stop sharing. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Give me 1 second. I'm muting everyone now.
Okay. Thank you, Jessie, and welcome everyone to the semi-annual meeting of the Beth McGroarty Fan Club. Over 500 people registered for this event, and we all know why. Because an hour with Beth McGroarty is in itself a masterclass in wellness trends. Beth is so knowledgeable and articulate and funny, even at 8 a.m. for her in Los Angeles, that I know this conversation will be informative and entertaining. While the Future of Wellness 2023 Trends Report covers 12 trends in depth, we have time to update just a few today, sharing what's been resonating in the news and in the world. It is a testament to the depth and breadth of this report led by Beth that most of the trends have staying power, and I mean for years. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder of the 12 trends covered in this year's report. We have wellness and gathering, wellness and travel, wellness and workplace, wellness and beauty, wellness in cities, wellness in weight, wellness in governments, wellness in water, wellness in sports, wellness and senses, wellness in biohacking, and wellness and faith. Each of those trends dig deep into those topics, and it's an incredible read, and I urge you to check that report out if you haven't already, but I suspect a lot of you devotees, Susie's holding it up, a lot of you devotees on this call have likely read this report. We're very fortunate, in addition to Beth, to have Skylar Hubler joining us today. Skylar, give a wave. She is Senior Cultural Strategist for TBWA Worldwide and a frequent and beloved contributor to our annual Trends Report. Skylar will share what she has been seeing over the past 6 months and also what's on the horizon. And what's on the horizon for Skylar is more volleyball, preferably on a beach. Is that correct, Skylar?
That is true. You know, nothing makes you feel more out of shape than playing sports on sand, but we're working on it. So it's a good time.
Okay, perfect. All right, we're going to get started because we've got a lot to cover. Beth, our lead trend for 2023 is wellness and gathering. Wellness comes for the loneliness epidemic, where you cover the many ways that the wellness world and the wider world is finally tackling the biggest missing cornerstone in health, and that is social wellness, with all the new social wellness clubs, spaces, and concepts that put IRL, in real life, for all of those over 30, puts human connection at the very center. What are you seeing? What's the momentum? What are the new directions you're seeing since you released this trend at the beginning of the year? You're muted. You're muted, Beth. Jessie, can you help? Oh, there you go.
I'm sorry. That was very strange. I was talking just a minute ago. Anyway, sorry about that, Nancy. Anyway, there's so much to talk about momentum in this trend of, new spaces and concepts where human connection is the very point. I was just thinking people are so hungry now to come together. for any form of common culture, as spectacularly evidenced by the Barbie movie and Taylor Swift mania. People actually seem to want to give strangers bracelets. But anyway, there's so many things that are going on. One sort of new genre in wellness is the social wellness club. And it's really on the global march since we wrote the trend, with new developments from India to the UAE. We feel like we know what these are, these clubs. They're cool, urban, social hangout spaces with lots of wellness and recovery programming. But what you see is the angles are really expanding. The new St. Haven in Melbourne is a social longevity club, full body MRIs, brain scans, blood testing, hyperbaric oxygen. Not all of these clubs are urban. Gravity House in the Western US is a members only social club / lodging with co-working and fitness and a big focus on social mountain sports. There's just so many to talk about. One question is, with so many pricey models that are all pitched at the 1% to 5%, is saturation at the high end coming? Another aspect that I think is really important that we didn't cover in the trend is that modern housing, which is a villain in our loneliness crisis, keeping us apart. Now we're seeing in the last few months some interesting new social real estate and housing models. And this isn't just wellness real estate for millionaires. A huge affordable housing development called Alafia, which is coming to a low-income part of Brooklyn, is deeply based on the Blue Zones principles. And it's all about design that sparks social connection, with a maze of social and recreational facilities and walking paths. Lemner in Denmark is a fascinating new development. They let citizens co-develop social, sustainable co-living communities themselves. So they help hubs of, say, 20 to 50 family and friend groups get their social wellness community designed, financed, and built. I think another key thing to talk about since we wrote the trend, which is how more governments are taking action to fight loneliness through policy. And certainly we know that exclusive wellness clubs can never address this issue at scale. There's just so much going on. In a first, South Korea gave young people that are so isolated by the pandemic $500 a month just to get out of the house. The lonely and very polarized US has lagged so badly on social wellness policy, but the proposals in the last few months are unprecedented. The US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an advisory on the epidemic of loneliness in the United States, laying out a 6-pillar framework for a national strategy. Just a few weeks ago, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy introduced legislation called the National Strategy for Social Connection Act that would create a whole new federal office in the US to repair our broken social infrastructure, proposing everything from funding meeting spaces and arts clubs, more public swimming pools, and a new national service program that would have young generations helping senior citizens. Just this week, Hillary Clinton penned an important article in The Atlantic called The Weaponization of Loneliness, arguing that social media and extremists want to exploit our disconnection, and the price tag is democracy itself. She calls for a major investment in social facilities, sports teams, volunteer groups, and suggests mandatory civilian service for young people like the Peace Corps to rebuild some sense of shared identity in this culture. So basically, whether it's new social wellness concepts, new social policy, the feeling is that tackling loneliness will remain the huge future trend, because all the forces that are driving it, which is an increasingly single, kinless, aging, urban, remote work, and digitally engulfed world, are only going to get worse.
Well, that's we just wanted to start on a cheerful note, everyone. Beth, a question for you. We've heard a lot about the social clubs that are up everywhere, and I know Six Senses is opening some, and we ourselves were at Remedy Place for a big event, and will be again. Are there any of these not at the very high end?
Oh yeah, there's great ones. And just I'm thinking in Brooklyn, you can even pay what you can afford. I think Othership is a really fascinating model, part bathhouse, part social club from Toronto that is about to expand. I would say that's, totally middle class. I think there's I think we're going to see more affordable models. I think there's a lot of grassroots kind of clubs starting, but it gets the most ink the sort of luxury ones, and we're seeing, but there's a lot coming on the high end, and I do see some saturation in cities around this.
And what's your thought on technology and its impact on the loneliness epidemic?
Well, it's obviously, I mean, it took off when we got smartphones, it went rampant. I mean, all of the new, US policy papers and proposals very much talk about how to, controlling technology in a major new way as a part of fighting this loneliness situation. I mean, I started out by talking about Barbie and Taylor Swift because it's just a sort of cultural phenomenon of people getting off their screens and wanting, to gather. So I think
we certainly see that in everything that we do. Yeah.
People.
I mean,
But yes, there's a lot of, proposals in government all across the world about, curbing technology for young people particularly. So, I mean, there's no question that our loneliness epidemic tracks with the rise of technology.
I can't leave this conversation where you twice mentioned Taylor Swift and gathering without asking Susie to weigh in for one moment, having just been to a Taylor Swift concert, thanks to Katrine, who is also on this call, and the extraordinary gathering feeling that it was for you. So Susie, and also such a trend, Susie is our chair and CEO. I think everyone knows Susie, but go ahead, Susie, tell us about gathering at Taylor Swift.
Well, thank you. And thank you for mentioning it, Beth. And I did also just see the Barbie movie. So I guess I'm on trend. Katrine invited me to the Taylor Swift event in San Jose. I guess it was a couple weeks ago. And, I said yes, because everyone's talking about it, just to see what they're talking about. And what was lovely to see is that there were a lot of mothers and daughters, and they were both dressed up in Swiftie outfits and lots of glitter and boots. And I mean, Taylor Swift was very impressive. Katrine, you can weigh in maybe a little more, because Katrine actually has studied a little bit about Taylor Swift because of the fact that you can tell it, Katrine, about the dance floor.
Just tell us about the gathering, the whole experience of gathering a group that size. When is the last time you were at a concert of like thousands and thousands of people for something like that?
There were like 65,000. And what our friend mentioned is that, there was no, marijuana smell, it was just very, it was very wholesome, and people were singing along. I mean, everyone was singing. I didn't know the words, but others were singing. And it was just, and you're right about the bracelets, that was kind of a thing. You have a bracelet and you exchange. So there was a whole culture around it. And it was lovely to see, and it was lovely to be part of it, even though I'm not of the age of Taylor Swift.
Oh, but you're as young as you feel. Katrine, anything you would like to add about the gathering experience? You're muted.
I think what Susie said about, there was no marijuana smells, there was nobody passing out. Everybody was sort of nice to each other. People were, singing together. I was impressed that even the men were singing the words, and even the men were dressed. Everybody was really nice and friendly to each other. And the word that I left the concert with, in my mind, was generosity, because I think Taylor Swift has such a generous spirit, and she sang for 3.5 hours. And she just has this spirit of generosity. And I think that in the gathering, we all kind of felt that, we felt like being generous to people next to us, and, forgiving the person that spilled a drink on my husband behind us. I mean, everybody was sort of just getting along. It was very, very nice.
Well, I think that's a fantastic example, honestly, of everybody coming together and back in the real world, getting together, having, sharing an experience. And I think, we find that obviously at the summits, we've always gathered them in person, no matter what. It's just a really important aspect of wellness. And I think we in this industry do have an opportunity to help people get through this loneliness epidemic in really important ways. So Beth, thank you for that trend. Susie and Katrine, thanks for sharing. We'll send a photo of Susie and Katrine at the concert along with the notes, just for fun, so you can see. Okay, I'm going to go to Skylar now. Skylar, your trend, written with your colleague Cecilia, wellness and workplace. Workplace wellness finally starts to mean something, is about how all the workplace wellness initiatives, the old ones, nap pods, yoga classes, never really worked, but how things are now getting meaningful and better. We actually talked about this yesterday on a master class we held for our Institute ambassadors with Thierry Mallory, the global economist. And he spoke about the new elements to workplace well-being, purpose, community, et cetera. Skylar, what are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I mean, I think everything that we outlined in the report definitely still stands and is only gaining momentum. And really, the whole trend that we wanted to highlight was the fact that we're no longer just popping in these nice little benefits like, yoga in the office or nap pods in the office, or maybe $10 towards a gym membership, but really restructuring work as a whole in a way that doesn't hurt your mental health and your physical health in the first place. And I think we're still seeing that kind of push and pull where employers are trying to figure out what those right solutions are. But I think it's only, again, being driven by this desire for more work boundaries. So one trend that's popped up, one new term that's popped up since we wrote this is the lazy girl job trend, which I don't know if you guys have heard, but it's big on TikTok, and it's basically people glorifying their very relaxed jobs. So the lazy girl job is not necessarily one where you're slacking off, but one where there's such great work-life balance that you almost feel guilty because you're enjoying yourself. So you can log off at 5 p.m. You earn enough to afford the basic comforts, but not enough where you feel compelled to work overtime. So again, we're seeing in culture this kind of glorification of the more relaxed, balanced job rather than this hyper ambitious, very prestigious job that we used to want to tout. So I think
maybe
that's
lazy isn't the right word then.
Right. I think that it's probably more of an attention grabber, really just again to draw focus to the issue. But with that being in mind as the kind of mindset that we're seeing now, especially among younger people in the workforce, I do think we're seeing some really interesting solutions that are actually beneficial. So one being the push for shorter work days. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the 4-day work week and eliminating a whole day, but the reality is that for a lot of companies who, have clients that they're indebted to, they can't be offline all 5 for, a whole day a week. So one trend that's, I think, continuing to gain momentum is the 6-hour workday. So for example, there's an Australian software agency called Code Heroes where everybody will work from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then you're free to do the other 2 hours of work whenever you'd like. So for a smaller agency, it's really helped them be competitive with some of the bigger tech players like Amazon and Google. And they haven't adjusted anybody's pay in order to make this happen. So they're actually making the same amount of money as when they worked 8 hours. And employees say that they're actually 15% more productive in their shorter hours than when they worked 8 hours. So I think this is something where employers are going to need more proof that, longer work times aren't directly tied to greater productivity. But as we see more research and more studies in that space, I think shorter work days will be a continued trend. I have several others, so I'll rattle off a few more. Another one that I think is really interesting and kind of goes along with restructuring work as a whole is the rise of flexible employee benefits programs. So not entirely new, but I think something that's continuing to gain steam where if you think about how benefits largely work today, it's you agree to work for an employer, you get kind of a list of set benefits. Maybe 40% of those benefits are applicable to you and the other 60% aren't. Whereas instead we're shifting towards these more hyper-personalized programs. Some great examples are Forma, Level, and Juno, all of these startups that are continuing to gain funding. But essentially how it works is you kind of get a dashboard. There's endless perks you can choose from, whether it's transit passes or pet adoption subsidies or elder care for those taking care of their parents. really anything you can imagine. And every employee has a set amount of money to spend on those benefits as they wish. So it's kind of moving away from the blanket offerings that are good enough for everyone, but probably not great for one person specifically. And instead recognizing that everybody's definition of wellness looks different. Everybody's hobbies are different. Everybody's family situations are different, and really restructuring benefits to reflect that. And then
Scholar,
the last,
we talk, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say that we talk a lot about shifts in culture in a
Mhm.
workplace, and particularly at a leadership level, in order that the culture of a company changes and the employees of that company, can look to leadership. That it's more cultural than programmable.
Mhm.
What's then really programmatic? So what's your thought on the changing culture of the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, to that point of the different kind of approaches to work right now, I think it really has to be modeled at the managerial level for people to feel like they actually can take time off and they can log off at 6 p.m., right? So we have seen kind of generational tensions in the workplace where younger employees are maybe frustrated with their older bosses who aren't actually giving them the space to have boundaries. And older employees might be frustrated with younger workers who are setting boundaries that they find to be inappropriate or lazy, going back to what we talked about initially. So I think, yeah, to your point, it's really about changing the whole workplace culture to allow for people to log off on time and to actually create the boundaries that they need to. And I think we'll see more and more employers tout that as the new kind of attractive company culture to pull in workers, rather than the previous perks we used to maybe tout, like ping pong tables in the office and a beer tap and fun work parties. So it's kind of shifting to where we don't want the culture of work to be something that drags us further into work, but rather we want something that's going to give us that recognition that we need boundaries and we need space away from work.
Thank you, Scholar. Beth, do you want to comment on that before we move to policy, to governments?
Just how global this is. I mean, I was so fascinated by, recently Chinese college grads posting photos of themselves sprawled on the ground like zombies.
Mhm.
Part of what they call the lying flat movement there, which is an expression of, young people in China's relentless, brutal 996 work paradigm, work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. But I think just the sort of global questioning, I mean, it came out of the pandemic, that this script that work is your life is so powerful.
Yeah. Okay. Lots to think about there. And that is not surprising that trend would really resonate and have a lot of legs as the year goes on. Okay, Beth, over to you. You touched on how governments and public policy are ramping up the war on loneliness. Thierry Mallory's trend in this report, Wellness in Government, the Case for Coming Together, is more generally on a new momentum for wellness in policy. What else is emerging in this front? What do you see here?
Well, the huge trend and rising fast is prescribing wellness. And within that, the hottest topic is food prescriptions, which are increasingly being paid for. The Biden administration is approving that states to cover food as medicine under Medicaid. Doctors in London are issuing things called Rose vouchers for low-income families so they can buy fresh fruits and vegetables at any local store. And there's this spawning companies that are marketplaces and platforms for food RX. There's a bunch: Free From Market, Modify Health, Bite Well, Vitable. These are companies that are all working with governments and employers to create a new concept: food is medicine and food as medicine. At the same time, the concept of exercise prescriptions is rising. And both companies, fitness companies, Technogym and eGym, are really pivoting to work with healthcare providers and employers to prescribe workouts and deliver workouts, the prescribed workouts. And, the wellness prescription, whether it's nature, social, workouts, food, I mean, this has huge implications for insurance reimbursement in a country like the US. So I think prescribing wellness, particularly with a focus on a new recognition that food is indeed medicine, is an interesting policy move.
And are you seeing governments? I mean, is this this is global, governments all over are looking at this? Because we hear about this in our global work, but what's like really happening in that front?
There's a lot of companies, and I mean, it's just started with Medicaid, but there's a lot of proposals. And I mean, I think the UK has plans that do this. I mean, it's just different to say, here's, you know, healthy food is important. It's another thing to pay for
Right.
a prescription and make it, and the future will be about making it as seamless as getting an Amazon delivery. But yes, there's a lot going on. And global.
Skylar, do you have any thoughts on this particular topic as well?
We did just do a future of food report, so I should. But yeah, I mean, I think it is something we're continuing to see, especially with people really calling out pharma companies who maybe have a, shall we say, controversial relationship with food companies, and people are more and more looking to food and pharma companies to work together to actually create beneficial, more accessible nutrition. So yeah, agree with everything Beth said.
Well, it's an excellent segue to the next trend, this whole food and medicine and pharma. Beth, Dr. Mike Roizen's trend from this report, wellness and weight, the skinny on brown fat and eliminating obesity, basically how approaches that move brown fat to white fat can tackle obesity. But there is so much in the news these days about obesity and how weight loss has been radically transformed. It's every day, all the time. So can you talk a little bit about that? I think there's actually a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, and just to pay homage to, I mean, Dr. Roizen's trend, which was written in, you know, the beginning of the year, about how brown fats mitochondrial density burns lots of calories, white fats doesn't. This is a hot topic in metabolic research. And I think the Ozempics won't be the only future game in town. And there's been a bunch of interesting studies since he wrote that trend, whether from Cornell or Cambridge, showing things, you know, new therapeutics and proteins that do move white fat to brown, how prolonged cold exposure does the same thing. But you're right, since this trend was released, and there's been an astounding lightning fast shift in the conversation and the industry around weight loss. And pharma is taking down behavior change with the rise of the Ozempics. I mean, when we wrote this report, we couldn't even use the word weight loss because we respected body positivity movement. We rejected wellness as historic, very toxic, get thin focus. That's all out the window now. So where are we? Everything is changing. The anti-obesity market is going to be $77 billion by 2030. That's outrageously huge growth. And the once behavior changed, wellness-focused companies like Noom and Weight Watchers are pivoting to prescribing the new weight loss drugs. Cha-ching. Big news every week on this front, how effective the drugs are, how they turn off the food noise in your head, how they might curb addictions, they boost heart health. Conversely, we read about the serious side effects reported, from nausea to stomach paralysis, how these drugs make you thin, but not necessarily healthy, how stronger drugs in the class are coming right ahead. So, you know, let's face it, weight loss has been a huge driver of the wellness industry, first more overtly, then very quietly. But the question I have is, what will be the new best approaches? You know, the alternatives to taking pills for life. What would a science-backed integrative approach really look like? Would it be phased, using drugs as tools to help very overweight people shed weight, transitioning them off them, helping them maintain? We need to think as the wellness industry through integrative models, evidence-based models that are, you know, beyond taking a drug for 70 years of your life. Although they're incredibly, you know, they show incredible effectiveness. I just don't think it's been thought through.
So this brings up, you know, really sort of systemic change to the wellness industry, right? We talk a lot about the integration of medicine and wellness. We talk a lot about, you know, how the integrative approach to a person's health and well-being. This has really kind of thrown a bomb into all of that. And it's gotten so much attention, and so much attention from the wellness world and people adopting it. I mean, talk a little bit more about what this does to the industry, just kind of a the soul of the industry, and where you think how that's going to shift.
Later, yeah, I mean, I was going to talk later about the longevity trend, which has exploded in just a few months since we've written our report. But, you know, the weight loss and drug and longevity industry really shifts wellness to a very different vibe. There's a very different culture emerging in wellness that I'm interested in. It's more medical, it's more high tech, it's more male. You know, the world's biggest tech bros, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Peter Thiel, are the biggest investors in the reverse aging space. It's more pharma. It's even more expensive. You know, the vibe is shifting towards more intense self-optimization. It's there's fear-based, whereas another industry is more healing, emotional, about training and acceptance. So it makes me wonder, are two wellness industries emerging? One that I would call kind of hard care and one that I would call soft care.
Oh, that's incredibly interesting. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, we knew that with prevention, when there's such huge gaps in healthcare about, you know, waiting till people are sick, obviously. And we knew at some point medicine, technology, you know, was going to come in and address and also exploit this massive opportunity. I mean, I didn't, you know, have a whole section I wrote on longevity. I mean, it's just, you know, the speed at which the longevity industry has become the new pillar and obsession in wellness is, you know, astounding as weight loss. There's so many biotech startups. There's the longevity clinic is like become the new genre in wellness, and it's really dissolving the line between medicine and wellness. They're all over the world. They're opening all over the world. You know, there's companies that are doing really obviously needed glaring gaps in healthcare, such as focusing on preventative diagnostic testing, as opposed to, you know, testing you after you have cancer, you know, and such as the AI-powered diagnostics company Fountain Life and various others. There's just so many angles, but you know, I would say the things that are have the most momentum since, you know, we worked on the thing is the rise of an obsession and kind of market around longevity and the weight loss factor. And, you know, it's medicine and wellness are no longer, I mean, that line that used to seem sort of understandable, it's dissolving. Technology and healthcare are moving into the wellness space. And I don't really think people are talking about it enough. I mean, it's so profound, it's moving so fast, but I'm interested in what the cultural shift is, the vibe,
right,
in the industry.
And what do you, and where are you seeing that play out right now? Let's say.
I'm not really seeing it play out right now, but I wonder if it will. You know, I mean, I just wonder if people will have a sense of, you know, very different approaches. You know, I call it hard care and soft care, but, you know, and then there'll be obviously people that work on integrative models. It's just, you know, I mean, wellness has been a very sort of woman-centric, very mental wellness, emotional wellness has become was the dominant kind of moves in wellness in the last decade plus. I mean, we're moving to like hardcore, you know, medical interventions, technologies, you know, stem cells and, you know, DNA repair and, you know, reversing senescent cell. I mean, this is in the name of prevention and wellness, but, you know, I just think that we've always thought of wellness as a unit, as a single culture, and I think it's becoming more than one culture.
Beth, what do you think this is going to do? This sort of cultural shift, what's it going to do to traditional wellness businesses? What now might be in your soft care category? What's it going to do to spas and treatments and things that we think of in this realm?
Well, more will obviously integrate more of the hard care. I mean, lots of spas are integrating even things like diagnostic testing, longevity, you know, medical-based longevity treatments of all kinds. I mean, even doing stem cells. But what is it going to, I mean, I think there'll be I think that there will be some backlash I mean, I think the question about the longevities industry, which there's like, has incredible power and could change medicine. I think there's, such moral and philosophical questions about, how do you live for 130 if you don't have any money? Can our planet support resource wise, why aren't we relinquishing the world to young people? Is it a narcissistic move? I mean, and, just big questions around, I think there will be some backlash against, everybody wants to be healthier, and the health span is the dominant term for as long as they can. And I'm not just discounting that. I think I think that there will be kind of almost like an OG kind of sense of retro wellness that will become more valued. And because it delivers different things, emotional healing, mental wellness, connection, these things are not, first of all, they're all critical to longevity. So,
Right.
there's not it's not like soft care wellness doesn't attack longevity. But I just think that I think that the sense of a culture shift, and then a kind of reappreciation in some ways for OG wellness, maybe in the future.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Skylar, you've gone from my screen, but I assume you are still there. I want to pivot and ask you what you're seeing, new shifts or trends you're seeing this last half year. I think there's something called low pressure wellness.
Yeah, so it runs a little bit counter
Yeah.
to what Beth is saying, but as we know, there's no single trend, right? There's always going to be a kind of push and pull. So I think one thing we've been tracking at Backslash is this kind of push towards more soft or low pressure wellness, as you might call it. So we're kind of seeing this push towards a more accessible, less intimidating era of wellness, where we're really throwing out the wellness rule book and instead favoring whatever feels good. And again, it's really being driven by the younger crowd. There was a global survey from last year that found 76% of those aged 13 to 39 believe that wellness is, quote, anything that makes you feel good. And we're seeing this kind of feel good, more relaxing, comforting era of wellness. So for some examples, on TikTok, a big trend right now is bed rotting, where you're just celebrating being in bed all day and, again, having no shame about lounging around. In the fitness world,
Bed rotting,
bed rotting, yeah. TikTok and the terms.
They need some better names for these
Yeah.
things. I just want to say.
I agree. But yeah, intentionally kind of, lazy sounding language. But in fitness, we're also seeing this with things like soft hiking, which is really about going slow on your hikes and enjoying nature rather than trying to mount a peak or burn a lot of calories. Same thing with exercise snacks, they're calling it, which are these kind of short 2-minute workout breaks. Also the 75 soft challenge, which was a reaction to the 75 hard challenge, just kind of with softer rules. Also seeing it in eating with things like intuitive eating, and kind of more generally with the pushback against this more aesthetic version of wellness, where online, everybody will post their wellness routines and they look so perfect and so curated. Whereas now we're kind of seeing the opposite of that, and people really just wanting this more attainable version of wellness, where wellness becomes more of a comfort blanket than another form of pressure in our lives that we're adhering to. So I think we'll continue to see the push for the harder science, of course. But I think on the lifestyle realm, we also kind of want wellness to be the softer antidote to what healthcare hasn't been, which has traditionally been a little bit more sterile, a little bit less inviting, right? So I think there's always going to be that kind of dichotomy with wellness where we want it to do both in a sense. But it is really interesting to see how the younger generations are talking about wellness and what kind of need they're looking for it to fill in their lives.
So, Skylar, you quoted now a few times TikTok,
Yes.
things on TikTok and this sort of younger generation. Would you say that there's a difference, Beth, Skylar, between the demographics you're talking about? I mean, is there a demographic split here in what you guys are talking about? Beth, are the 30-year-olds to in your category as well, or is Skylar representing that more?
I think there's a real age split. I mean, the stuff that's sort of propelling the kind of fear-based longevity kind of, hyper interventions around longevity and clinical interventions, I mean, is, I think, very much a slightly older demographic. I think, young people are, grew up completely deluged by a very self-optimizing, social media driven, you have to look beautiful, you have to look great in your athleisure. I mean, so much pressure around wellness that I don't think we understand that are people that are older. So I think this soft, bed rotting, do what you want, feel how you want, exercise how you want, eat how you want, yes, definitely associated with younger generations who are the consumers of wellness in the future. So pay attention to what TikTok does, even if 90% of it is, not scientific, it's cultural knowledge.
And Skylar, is the research that you do primarily with a younger demographic, or do you also talk to people like me?
No, we do span demographics. I will say the trends business is largely biased towards younger generations, as it always has been, just because, they're viewed as the people driving the change and driving the future. But no, definitely we look across all demographics. I think it is just kind of interesting to see, whereas while the older generations might want more of that science and that proof, which makes sense given their life stage, right? They're probably dealing with the more actual medical issues, whereas the younger generations maybe don't have as many, ailments right now. And for them, it's more of a lifestyle than a necessity at this point.
Beth, do you have a question you would like to ask Skylar? And Skylar, you can ask a question of Beth as well.
Oh, perfect. Well, grill her.
Skylar, and my brain just went dead. But I mean, I just, off the top of your head, any other trends that are like burning a hole in your head right now?
I mean, one thing that we're always tracking, and that I actually was going to touch on in the workplace section as well, is just all the demand for heat technologies and cooling technologies right now. So in workplace, we're seeing big pushes right now for heat protections for manual and outdoor laborers. I know President Biden just announced big plans to protect workers and communities from extreme heat, but I think it's going to continue to be a big point of innovation for the wellness world. So we're seeing new kind of cooling fabrics, cooling backpacks for workers. There's helmets with fans. And I think those kind of things are going to become an essential, as temperatures rise. And I think there's huge implications for wellness in terms of, wearables that will alert you when heat is getting too high. Even heat-focused healthcare services, I think, will be a big necessity. Changing when we work and when we're going outside and when we're not. So I think that's a huge area that we obviously have become well-versed on talking about the problem, but we're still a long ways from solutions that will help us get by and deal with heat on a day-to-day. So that's a big one that we're always watching. But
yeah, it's so interesting because I had that down as one of the trends to talk about too. I mean, there's the heat wave, the speed at which heat waves are ramping up is alarmingly faster than science predicted. So I mean, cooling the planet, cooling homes, cities, cooling ourselves is going to be a huge trend in wellness. I mean, certainly huge in wellness architecture and design. Mm-hmm. It's going to become the burning issue. It's like you need everything from rooftop gardens, intense tree cover, heat reflective paint covering for roads and roofs, all new materials, using ancient heat fighting design from places like the Middle East, smart tech, cities having like cooling centers, more public pools, wild swimming, a trend I didn't get to talk about, but I wanted to. But I mean, wearables, as you say, I mean, I just saw a trend report yesterday on climate adaptive beauty. So, I mean, it's all about climate adaptation. And I think for the wellness travel world, the data is already coming out, and for the travel world, is that people are really rethinking destinations, moving away from the traditional travel hotspots. So they're trading the beaches and the deserts for the mountains. They're trading the Mediterranean for Scandinavia. They're nixing the summer vacation for the fall and spring one. So like cool is the new cool in travel.
Even
And it wasn't
yeah,
lost on me that you said it was a burning, and it wasn't lost on me that you said it was a burning issue, Beth.
Oh yeah, I love punning, right?
Yes, I appreciate it. Skylar, you were going to respond?
Oh, I was just going to say on Beth's note about travel, there is another article that just came out about a travel insurance company in the UK now offering extreme heat insurance as a way to, pick up travel in the places that are seeing a decline due to extreme temperatures. So I think it's also interesting to think about. Traditionally on vacation, we were so worried about the rain killing our vibe, right? Whereas now it's extreme heat is the new vacation killer. So I think insurance is going to be a huge market as well.
That's amazing.
And just think about, like Maui on fire.
Yes.
Things that are inconceivable are happening regularly.
Yeah, I was going to say, we didn't really talk about climate. That could be an entire masterclass, but the connection between, personal well-being and the well-being of the planet and all of that is inextricable and needs, a much bigger conversation. And it sounds like these kinds of things that you're seeing touch on that in some way. Okay, what are the three? We did a little lightning round here. I think we're gonna tell you about the trends report, and they're available now. This mid-year trends report, as well as individual trends, which you can purchase and download, which we've never done before, which are very, very popular. We hope you'll subscribe to the Trendium, but I'm not going to put those slides up in honor. Instead of keeping this conversation going a little, we'll send all that information with the notes after. What three publications do each of you read every day that are essential to the work you do, spotting trends? Beth, what do you read in the morning?
Gosh. The New York Times.
Name three.
Name
three.
Okay.
Okay.
I read the Washington Post. I read the New York Times. I read the Economist. And then of course, Google News, like keeping your finger on, all the searches around every aspect of wellness, Financial Times. More mainstream. And I read all the industry publications, wellness and health, but yeah, definitely. I think just keeping just the mainstream, most respected news.
And how much time do you spend reading each day, absorbing this information?
Maybe like an hour.
And Skylar, how about you?
I would have to say my favorite is The Atlantic. I also subscribe to a newsletter called The Hustle, which is great for business news. Dirt is another great newsletter for more cultural news. Those are probably my top three, but like Beth said, it span pretty much everything. Japan Times, South China Morning Post, a lot of time.
A lot of time.
And do you guys listen to podcasts other than, of course, Global Wellness Conversations, which is our podcast? What podcasts do you listen to for information?
I listen to Armchair Expert, but that's more of a personal than a work related. I listen to The Future of Everything with Wall Street Journal. I'm blanking on the other one. So Beth, you go.
It's funny. My friends yell at me about not being, they think I should be a natural for podcasts, but I'm just so word oriented and reading oriented. I haven't really made the transition. I also listen to The Future of Everything. There's a lot of podcasts outside of health and wellness that my friends will send me and listen to, but I know that, it's the most important medium really in health and wellness now, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. So it's a transition I need to make.
Talk a little bit about the podcasts that are in this arena, in this industry, a little bit.
Well, there's interesting ones that are, kind of maybe 12 really, that really are about taking on, fact and fiction and wellness, like Maintenance Phase. It's a great thing because it's a long format. A long format allows for lots of different voices, experts, pro, con, let somebody like dive into psilocybin, whether, it's medical evidence and impact. So, it's a natural to explore these topics. And, there's a sort of mini industry of kind of fact-checking wellness podcasts, I would say.
Skylar, what's your, in the wellness arena specifically, what do you think of the podcasts that are out there?
I mean, my first thought, there's a ton, it's almost overwhelming where you don't know where to start. I know someone in the chat mentioned Huberman Lab. That's probably the one I listen to more as a personal learning experience. But yeah, I mean, we in our job, we span across industries. So I can't say I'm tied to wellness specifically, but it is obviously a huge topic. But there's so many now, depending on what you're looking for.
I'm going to ask each of you what you are most optimistic about. Can be in the wellness industry, can be in the world in general, but I think you're both very steeped in the wellness industry. We've heard some pretty, sort of scary and challenging things coming up. There's always a silver lining to a lot of these clouds. But what are you optimistic about?
I mean, I think we've talked about this in different trends calls, but the kind of place that wellness, I mean, I'm going to just speak about wellness here. The kind of place wellness was pre-pandemic, the sort of super product driven, goopified, kind of just sort of trend a minute, sort of hysterical market, has really changed. And it's palpable in all kinds of ways. I mean, we were talking a lot about new relationships between medicine and wellness, the kind of bigger demands for science. But I feel like sort of even beyond what I thought, there's so much momentum for wellness globally coming out of the pandemic, but it just is sort of more grounded and less hysterical, more tangible, I think more creative than it was. Just, I mean, sure, there's still, an avalanche of supplements. It's not going away. I'm not talking about it before and after, but I think that the sort of focus on emotional wellness, mental wellness, but just the tangibility of things that companies are doing and people are doing seems sort of, more meaningful, less, I don't know, fashion based. When you research trends in wellness, which is what we do, sure, there's, algae and sea moss will pop up, there's always going to be something, but that kind of this velocity has definitely slowed. But then when the things that are evolving are more substantial, more tangible, and more impactful, I think.
Skylar, what do you think?
I can't top Beth's answer, but I mean, one thing that comes to mind that I think will continue to be gaining momentum is kind of this anti-consumption trend, again, driven by younger people. I promise I'm not only a Gen Z researcher, but I do think we're seeing, a big push to kind of reconsider your consumption habits, which obviously has a huge impact on the climate. So everything from the push to grow your own food to thrifting your own clothes and repairing your own clothes. In France, they just announced that in a couple of years, they'll start paying people to repair their clothes, which I think is a great initiative. Also, even with, in travel, the kind of restrictions we're seeing there, where Amsterdam is banning cruise ships from the city center and destinations are introducing, travel caps on the amount of tourists that they'll welcome. So I think we're kind of understanding the need for limits in certain industries when it comes to the climate impact. And I think there's this real awareness now that maybe hasn't been there before, whether it's driven by sustainability or driven by this kind of anti-capitalism ethos. But whatever the case, I think there is, people kind of turning inward, reconsidering how much, 2-day shipping they're getting from Amazon, reconsidering how much packaging they're using. This kind of shift towards wanting to use less and do less for the sake of the planet, I think is a positive mindset shift that, again, will impact every industry.
Yeah.
And so that makes you feel optimistic. I mean, that people are paying attention in a substantive way to the planet.
It does. Yeah, it does. Because I think, there is so much pressure, especially with social media, to show off everything you have and everything you're buying. And I think we're now seeing the kind of antidote to that as people wanting to show off that they know how to repair things and how to make their own stuff and ferment their own vegetables. And it's kind of this almost glorification of the more simple lifestyle, which is ultimately way more sustainable. So I think that is something to feel good about in the climate realm, where we're obviously bombarded with bad news on a daily and hourly basis. So I think the more that businesses can reinforce that and restructure their business model in a way that promotes people to buy fewer, better, longer lasting things, will be really positive just for how we consume as a society as a whole.
Just ask each of you, what is your own, in your life, in your personal life, what is something that you point to as driving wellness for you? Could be, dinner with friends. It could be, volleyball. It could be anything. But what's the central thing in your life that has to do with wellness? Skylar, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I work a lot. So I think for me, all of the messaging around the importance of wellness and taking time for yourself, whether it's working out or spending time with friends or going on my, daily walks or runs that I've come to really value. I think it's just that constant reminder of making time for wellness every day, which for me means stepping away from my screen for a little bit, not even bringing my phone on my walk, being totally unplugged and having it be kind of a safe spot away from the normal hustle and bustle. So I guess I do somewhat fit with the soft wellness trend in that instance, and that for me, it's more of a lifestyle comfort at this point. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Beth?
I have to do better at learning to step away, but when I do, no, I really, for me, I honestly think reading is like a huge part of my stability and mental health. I just love reading novels. I love being with people. I love swimming. I mean, it's all very simple. I think what Skylar's talking about, a kind of anti-capitalist ethos. I mean, you can just see it everywhere, like things that are like kind of have the most, bling and wellness, like the hot girl walk. I mean, that's just a walk. These are not monetizable activities, they're literally unmonetizable, which is an interesting challenge for all industries to think about, when things become simpler, more accessible, doable, and less monetizable. But I think that, when you see that kind of stuff light up TikTok, these sort of almost absurdly simple kinds of wellness approaches, I think it's a sign of a kind of, as she's saying, a kind of deeper anti-consumerism, a deeper critique of capitalism. I think young people are really easy when you talk to them about critiquing capitalism, and in a way that my generation is still very, heavily defended and scared about that. So
Okay,
anyway.
I'm going to stop you there because we are at time, and I have my own reputation to protect, which is that I will deliver this on time. It's 12 o'clock. You guys have been incredible. I want to thank everybody for joining. I want to particularly thank Beth and Skylar for their insights and for sharing so generously all their thoughts. It's been incredibly informative. Please unmute and let's give them some global love.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Skylar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.